Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Social Ledger Report. This is JR here interviewing Philip, or I guess I don't want to really do an interview, but I want to talk to you, Philip. I know you came to us, so really appreciate you for having us here, or I guess joining us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, no, I'm from Boston, Massachusetts originally. I live in Stewart, Florida. I've been
Okay,
doing mortgages since, May 7th, 2001. And I just
mortgages.
celebrated my first Father's Day at 48 years old.
Wow. So you're 48 years old right now, and you're now a dad. So just yesterday, as the recording of this episode was Father's Day. So how are you feeling? How does it feel to? I take it you're a little bit of an older dad. So how's that been for you?
Oh, look, it's great. I have a lot more experience. There's nothing more precious than a baby girl, right? So
Love
I
that.
feel really blessed, but it also has helped me, reconnect in terms of, like, how I want to help out with, like, financial literacy and really convey to, like, a lot of, people kind of, starting to invest. What's the right age? All sorts of different investments. It's never too young. So I think it's also shifted my mentality of, how I can give back and really help people. They're just starting out in life.
I love that. I'm almost 30 and I don't think I became very well financially literate up until last year. So it took me a while. Like I understood how to invest, but I just never really paid much attention about appreciating versus depreciating assets. As far as I've been told, there's a lot of assets that actually appreciate, such as commodities, and then you have watches. So, we can talk about real estate because I feel like that's an area that is, per our last conversation, very vastly unaddressed. And I think what kind of got us in this room is talking about Fannie Mae. So we spoke about Fannie Mae enabling people to leverage their crypto to buy real estate. And, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have some tips and other ways you can help, some things you can give to help people go in the right direction about this. Does that ring a bell?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
One great thing that one of the government entities has done, Fannie Mae, is that they've made it easier to accept cryptocurrency, right? The head of the HA, Bill Pulte, that was his one, biggest thing was to get crypto more like accepted. Because, well, like what I would tell people is you want to be diversified on your investments. You never want all your eggs in one basket. Forget this YOLO thing. And crypto's a
Yep.
good way to diversify, right? And now, because
Okay.
Fannie Mae, which is one of the government entities, they're more accepting of it. The way it used to be before is they'd want you to kind of like have everything liquidated and then move it all over and into another account that forces you to sell and takes like a big tax loss. That's not the case anymore. So it's definitely more accepted in terms of like using it for assets, using it for a down payment, because the tried and true easiest investment, what I'd say for like average America, moderate income home buyers is real estate, right?
It's real estate. Like that's their biggest asset. Is that what you're saying?
That is what I'd always say is tried and true, where I think middle America, that people should focus in on, because you're gaining the whole value. Like even though you put nothing in or very little in, you get the whole gain on value. Like conversely, say you buy one Bitcoin, right?
Okay.
You only get the value
That's almost
of
like 70,000 today, I believe. Yeah, so you're
70,000.
so
But
you're
you
saying
only
buy
get the
one Bitcoin whole.
yeah, you only
Okay.
get the whole, right? And you buy say a house like in like Jacksonville, Florida, 350, right?
Okay.
And you put very little in or nothing in, and it goes up 10%. So it goes up 35,000 the following year. You get the full $35,000, right?
Okay.
And that's the beauty of it is that if you look at a balance, say everyone knows this penny doubling, right? Take a penny, so day one it doubles, you go 2 cents, and then 4 cents, and then 8 cents, and then 16 cents. It takes a long time for you to really build up this like nest egg that's worth it. And because it takes such a long time, I feel like sometimes people are impatient and they take maybe unnecessary risks. Okay.
It happens all the time. I'm one of them.
Yeah,
Truthfully.
right. And so
Truthfully.
the beauty of the real estate play is you buy it, right? It's not sexy. It's not. In fact, it can look crappy. I mean, you could actually buy like a crappy looking home, right? And right, it goes up, and you get the whole gain. And then the whole gain campaigns because it's like, say you buy a house at 350. Imagine starting your 401k with 350. That's like starting on day 20 of the penny doubling versus day 1 or 2.
So you're saying 401ks, which are mostly recognized to be owned by you, but enabled through the employer, you can sort of start your 401k not necessarily with buying stocks, but also with real estate. Is that kind of like what you're saying?
No, what I'm trying to say is that when you start investing, you usually start at the number 0, right?
Yes.
So day 1 is 0, right? But if
Okay.
you buy real estate, your starting off number is the value of the home.
Okay.
So
I follow now. That makes sense.
So that's like a really big thing of like why it's so important. I think and another really important thing where crypto does a really good job of is getting people excited to invest.
So you mentioned earlier that crypto is really good at diversifying your portfolio. Do you mean like owning one or a few coins, depending on the type of coin, like blue chip meme coins? You know, like what does that mean for you to have a diversified portfolio in crypto?
What that means is, one, I think you should have a couple coins. But
Okay.
2, I think every investor should have a little bit of crypto, right?
Yeah, I
Because
agree.
it's a good, solid, investment. You should never be like all in on anything. I think the mentality for especially someone younger is the mentality should be save. That is the mentality, is how much can we save on a monthly basis? Because then you can take your savings and then reinvest it into your investments.
So what's funny is you mentioned don't go all in on your assets, but is there ever a good opportunity, like just for my education and for the audience's education, is there ever a time where going all in on an investment, is it ever worth it? Maybe,
Boy,
you know,
I've seen people, only invest what you can afford to lose. So I would say
okay.
you don't want to go all in on anything because the loss will be painful. For most people, it's not worth it. Just, what's crazy is that if you're just fundamentally sound and you're just, you're the tortoise here, you're going to do great over time. The issue where people is they want to make it in one big swing, right? And this is the wrong way to look at things in life.
When you say big swing, kind of like as in, excuse me, as in, hey, right now maybe I'm trying to I have like a reachable goal that isn't very far off on the horizon. They go all in to get to that goal faster, like they go
Yeah,
all
or
in
they
on
want to go on
investment.
vacation, so they'll say, "Hey, I want to make more money on something. Let me just
Okay,
get a free vacation and put more money into, whatever it is, a certain crypto, a certain whatever." But
right.
I would say this: investing is like golf. The goal is not to lose money.
Yeah,
That's the way
and
it
the
is. And the way a
correlation
lot of
with
people play it is like a long drive competition where you
okay,
got these big, strong guys, and then they try to smash the ball as far as they can. And that may work well at Top Golf or for Facebook clips.
yup,
But just remember that the top people in the world that driving the ball, none of them have ever won anything in professional golf. And you will also win nothing in professional investing if you're you're all in. It's not going to be sick. That's why I like real estate. I'll tell you why. Some of the
yep.
best money, the best investments are the investments you can't touch.
Okay, so let me repeat that just to make sure I understood. You're saying the best investments that you can ever make are those that you cannot touch, like physically.
Yeah, because sometimes if an investment is a little bit less liquid, it benefits the customer because they make poor decisions over time. They make reactionary decisions. This is actually the reason why if people work for state governments, you can't touch your pension unless you quit or you retire. Why? Because historically, they've made bad decisions. They ran the math and said
Once
all
get
of our
all that money.
yeah, they make like all bad decisions. I mean, you can't trust people, right? They think they know, and the government realized, if you want a pension, right, and then this is what you need to do. And that's what I would say. That's actually like why I like real estate, because it's a little bit less liquid, right, than other investments, right?
Okay.
Not only do you get
So
the leverage, but it's a little bit more illiquid than say stocks.
okay, so that makes sense. So essentially, people are dumb, or I guess people have bad tendencies sometimes. They will, if they had access to all their 401k, like no repercussions, they would simply blow it away, making dumb decisions. Is that kind of like, maybe I'm
That's
overstating?
absolutely. This is absolutely what you see. In fact, if you look at it, this is the issue of professional athletes. A lot of them made a lot of money, but it's not what you make; it's what you save, right?
Okay.
This is a big thing. People would say, "Oh man, how did this guy that made 60 million go bankrupt?" Right? Or
We see it
30
all the time with
million.
sports
There's no
athletes.
limit. Like it doesn't matter how much you're up. You'll end up losing everything if your strategy is not correct.
So, can you educate us on what is a good strategy? I think I understand the point. Essentially, hey, if you have access to all this capital and you're not smart about it, you're going to go bankrupt. So, how can we mitigate
Yeah.
a
So
bankruptcy?
I would say the first thing, this is a great thing about a certain strategy is that is understanding your finances. This is really important. Every month you should sit down, if it's with if you're married, with your spouse or a financial advisor or someone, to go over all the bills. The reason is you actually need someone else to make sure, a second set of eyes, that you're being responsible and you're not making mistakes, right? Like
Okay.
everyone has this. In every form of government, in every form of a company, right? You have checks and balances and people of like looking at things. So I think that the first thing is to take control of your own finances. Make sure you don't have any ridiculous subscriptions, reoccurring things, and to be able to justify certain spending, right? You're less likely to do. Now, some people don't want to answer to people, and that's okay, but I'm just telling you the first step of investing is going over your monthly finances to stop any dumb purchases.
So, not to interrupt you, but just to add to your point, what I've been told that has changed my life has been what you can I'm sorry, let me say that again. What you can track, you can manage. So you're saying track your finances, your expenses, so that way you can better manage them, basically.
100%. This is the pivotal moment for people to get like step one in financial literacy is to manage it. And actually, you've seen a whole bunch of apps recently come out, right? And
Rocket
what do
Money
these
is one of
apps
my
do?
favorite.
They basically cancel subscriptions,
Oh,
right?
I didn't even know.
Yeah, there's a lot of these
Okay,
apps.
it's fun.
They're all coming out, but they basically allow you to see reoccurring charges. And these street interviews. I love the street interviews, right?
Oh, like
And-
you'll find on short videos, they're interviewing people, like, show me your expenses, sort of
Yeah,
thing.
well, they usually do it, have done it previously. I think it started off with of just when people were originally doing restaurants and dating, but now it's been into finances. And what they really look for is, would you like to they try to get people to do a street interview. And what happens is, and it's tougher because not everyone wants to show their finances.
Yeah,
that-
it's a very delicate matter.
that like people have shown without even knowing they've like paid for like ex-spouses subscriptions to like Netflix and all
Oh,
these
gosh.
like reoccurring charges that like they didn't even like know, like paying for like electricity bills at places that are not like all of these things, all these reoccurring charges. And I think going over this is like so important, right? To avoid when you have what's the best disinfectant? Sunlight.
Uh, in what aspect? Like I love getting sunlight exposure, but it could also be bad for the skin because of the UV index. If it's after a certain height, then that's where it gets dangerous. Is that kind of like the metaphor you're going
Well,
for?
what I would say is sunlight kills germs, right?
Oh, my bad.
So
Okay.
when it's light out, that's a great disinfectant. And when you go over your finances and you have
Okay.
to defend them, then you're going to spend less money. This is a big thing that
Yes.
people have it's like, you know what it's like almost? And it's like a government. Everyone always says, we just got to raise taxes or spend more money, right? And that's the thing. They're like, just tax the rich, tax, right?
Okay,
And the
yeah.
thing is that not that I'm opposed to ever taxing anyone. So let's get this right. I don't
sure.
mind taxing the rich. However, what I find is it's never a spending problem. It's never an income problem. It's a spending problem, even
Okay.
on a government thing, right?
I agree.
I'll give you guys like an example, right? The lowest form of government, right? The smallest type of government is typically like if you own a home, it's like an HOA community, right? And so
Okay.
the
HOA.
smallest form, but it's usually like an HOA community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's like legally protected by like state law, right? It's usually like an HOA community, and
I've
like
heard a lot of bad stories about HOA.
and you know
board.
why? I'll give you an example.
Oh,
Like
would love to hear
I
it.
showed the HOA community that if we went with a different landscaper, we could
Okay.
save, and that's usually the biggest line item for even if you're a renter. Understand this: your biggest expense if you're part of a community is always landscaping. 100%. This is always number one. And so
Landscaping is a make or break for
yeah,
a
and that's
property.
where that's where it's much easier to embellish charges is in the landscaping item. And
Gotcha.
so I found, to give you an example, 40% less with a competitor, right? And you're like, wow, you should be looked at as a hero because you saved 40% less. Let me tell you what happened, right?
Okay.
The
It's more
president
complicated.
of the board, right? And just so people know, transparency, I'm not on the title of my house. My wife is, right? But we live
respect.
together in the state of Florida. I basically have certain rights. But anyways, they don't realize that I know all my rights because it's a community property state in Florida. And so
Okay.
what do they do as opposed to when you save someone 40%? They don't say thank you. What they immediately do is they send you a cease and desist. And you're
Wait.
like, why?
A cease and
Because-
desist.
Yeah, because you're like, why? Because you're showing like all this waste. And you're like, well, who would benefit from the waste? The people on top, right?
Yes,
Because
okay.
when
It creates a
there's so
problem.
much waste, what happens is, and it doesn't matter who it is, that the people on top get to enjoy. You're like, well, what do you think's happening? I don't know. Like they were like, they take the money, right? There's obviously like a kickback, right? And this happens, and it's almost like expected, right, in HOA communities. When you look at the difference, like usually, like if you look at, let's say, Costco, right? Costco usually has like lower prices in the supermarket because they're buying at scale, right? So you buy
Okay.
big boxes and they're selling 1 million of them, and Costco doesn't like paint the floors, and it's like a warehouse with big boxes in it, right? And
Okay, that
because
makes
it's a
sense.
warehouse with big boxes and you pay a membership fee, the prices are like a lot less, right? So
Yeah, you get them a
the
bulk
more
So
that
that
you
makes
buy,
sense.
the item price should go down, right?
Per unit.
So you think
Yep.
if you have like 100 units, the price should be less because you have 100 units, right?
Yeah.
Think about it, right?
So
Here's
that makes
what-
sense.
Yeah. Okay. Here's what happens: the price is usually more. You're like, how is this? The math isn't mathing because
Yeah.
people are basically stealing, right? They don't care, and why this
Okay.
applies to like every single person is like people never question budgets. People don't dig deep. So for your personal finances, you need to question yourself. Can we save money? Where can we save money so we can invest? But the same mentality is that you need to put on yourself, you need to put on others. Because this is very important, right? Of being able to be critical of spending. Because we're almost brainwashed.
Yeah, like it's a spending problem.
Yeah, we're almost brainwashed, and it's so crazy, right? Like you see, like, oh, tax this person and that. Like they make it like political, right? Like just tax everyone. But it's
Yep.
not like they got enough money. Like I promise, we don't have spending. We don't have like an income problem anywhere, right? There's no like city or state or even. It's usually what? It's usually a spending problem. And to be like upfront with people, like I lived with this in my whole childhood.
Wow.
You're like, why? I'll tell you this. My dad was a physician, so physicians make pretty good money, right? He's a cardiologist,
Yeah,
but
you
but-
you have to be
but
very
the-
smart to do it.
yeah, but the sad part is my mom had a spending problem. Want to be upfront with us, and we were always in debt. You're like, how are you always in debt? Yeah, because my mom would spend too much. It didn't matter. My dad could have been, he was. My dad had to work like 2 jobs. You're like, no, why? Yeah,
That's
You're
rough. 2 jobs.
It ended up
And still-
causing. That's the second leading cause of divorce. Is
Money.
what? Is money, right? And so, I bring this up to be, financially responsible. That it's never really. Most people that will be like listening to the podcast or overall, they're not going to have an income problem. They're going to have a spending problem, right? And the spending is what we need to get under control so you can start to like diversify and put your money into real estate, into some crypto, into some stocks. It all works together, but it starts with, getting your spending under control, which doesn't seem like it's like great because people make you seem like you can like tax your way or spend your way out of problems. And the reality is that life is a game of pennies, right? This is what happens, right? And I know
You just
people don't
stack your
think of like
pennies,
this.
you accrue.
Yeah, like people waste money all the time. They're wasting here,
Okay.
they're wasting there, and I'm just looking out for people.
So let's talk about a little bit more on financial literacy. When I graduated college, it's been a while, but I started by listening to Dave Ramsey and other financial gurus. And I think what stood out to me about Dave Ramsey is kind of like saying your problem that you see with people is there's a spending problem. When people are in too much debt, they gotta eat beans, rice, stay at home, cook, don't eat out, don't go out for like X amount of months or weeks until you pay off whatever debt that is you have. So the one thing that I've learned since is not all debt is bad. And for some reason, Dave Ramsey thinks all debt is bad. I don't think, sorry, I got a notification. The editor will cut some of this stuff out. But what I was trying to say is not all debt is bad. Like real estate debt, you don't classify it as bad, correct? Because I certainly
No,
don't, from my
absolutely
understanding.
not.
Okay, bad debt would be probably high interest, like credit cards, maybe a personal loan or car loan. All that is very high debt. So let's talk about what people should do if they are currently living in debt. So I'm not a financial advisor, but one thing I'd love to get is people's opinion because people who are better well off, they got there because their spending was controlled, or at least they were able to make more money. So what would you advise for people if they may have too much debt or if they're trying to control their spending problem? How maybe is there some sort of correlation that goes with real estate or just general
Yeah,
advice
well,
you can give
here's what I
people?
would tell someone is that, you do have to, most of the time it is a spending problem, right? This is
sure.
exactly where it's like a fat person. Most of the time I could say it's an eating problem, right? This is a big thing.
Okay. So that's a good point.
There's no difference. You need to get the bills and you need to eliminate your credit cards, and you might have to eat some rice and beans. You might have to make a sacrifice, right? And people just, this is my biggest thing. And you're like, well, what would you tell them? Dave Ramsey, like if you had to pick, like, and I don't agree with Dave Ramsey on a lot, but if you had to pick Dave Ramsey or the other extreme, so you get 2-1, eliminate debt or like whatever, the opposites, wheel and deal.
Maybe spend more.
Right?
Or-
He
okay.
is way more right for most people than wrong.
Okay.
So I would go with David Ramsey. I like David Ramsey in terms of that. Where David Ramsey gets, where I think too much is like, you know, he makes it too long to buy a home, right? Like I would buy a home, there's a value to time. So I would take advantage of buying a home and then paying off the home. Okay, it is good debt, but I wouldn't like your first step. If Dave Ramsey and me agree, eliminate debt. You eliminate debt, you increase your cash flow. First
So
thing is
for,
to increase your cash flow.
Sorry, I'll let you finish your point, but I do have a question about like real estate. Not that I mentioned it, but what were you saying?
No, absolutely. What's on your
Okay,
mind
yeah.
with the real estate?
Yeah. So one thing, I have a buddy who helps with taxes, and he was talking about he made a video online talking about how real estate taxes can also be it can be very bad expense as well, because let's say you buy a home, it's worth $1 million, but with a 30-year mortgage, so that's, I guess, the average, but it's a pricey home for $1 million. But let's say property taxes are about 15%. So I don't remember the exact analogy, but let's say or I guess it was the interest rate, it was like 15%. So by the end of the month, or I guess by the end of the mortgage, you're essentially paying 150,000 extra on top of the million. So do you think that is still a good debt to have when you're paying more in interest? Well, you're paying a substantial amount in interest compared to your mortgage?
Yeah.
Does
So
that
look,
follow?
yeah, it's the best safest investment. Let's go over the math. Say I buy a house for $400,000, right?
Okay.
And on average, it goes up 8% a year because we live in Florida, right? We'll just use 8. So over 30 years, right? You add a 0. That's the quick math. So 400 is now worth 4 million, right? So in 30 years, if you did nothing special, you have $4 million asset, right? Guaranteed. This is pretty much it.
Okay.
Now, what you're saying is, you know,
It appreciates very well.
yeah, because you get the whole gain. Where his argument is wrong is that you're starting your baseline at 400,000 that became 4 million. And his argument is, well, you could have saved the difference and then invested this, and no, but you're starting your baseline much lower. So it's like you're starting day 1 of the penny doubling. If you buy real estate, it's like starting day 22. So you're skipping many years of investing. So
Okay.
the real estate is a much better play for a lot of people.
Okay. So here's another question, I guess, just for my understanding. So it makes sense. It looks like real estate really, and I've heard it all over, like real estate actually makes people very wealthy. It's not really rocket science, so anyone can become someone who sells homes. I forget the word, but it's very hard to actually be successful in being what's the word? I'm sorry. Someone who sells homes.
A
Do you know what I'm talking-
realtor?
Thank you. Yes, a realtor. It's very hard to actually become successful in this field, but yet it's something a lot of people can get into. So does that ring a bell? Maybe you've heard of this before.
Yeah, what I would tell people is this: look, most realtors fail, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend being a realtor as a profession because it's a really hard profession. But you don't need to get into investing in real estate. You just need a good realtor. You don't have to become the realtor.
Okay. So when you are buying homes, and let's say you're trying to flip them, let's say create an array of different rental units, you don't need to become a realtor yourself. You can simply get another person who can help you do that for you.
Absolutely. That's the
Okay.
way I would exactly look at this, right? Just focus in on the investing end and let someone else will be a real estate agent, because you bring up a good point. A lot of people think they're saving money from being the realtor, which is true. The average commission is 2 to 3%. but you're like, well, what would you think? That's money. Let someone else deal with the being a realtor, and you focus in on what you're doing best. Which is probably
Okay.
not being a realtor.
Definitely. And the reason why I ask that is because, and I think this is how Graham Stefan, which is a very popular YouTuber, which I listen on the occasion, he was a realtor. He got his real estate license and then he flipped homes himself, I believe, and that's how he became very wealthy. And then aside from being a YouTuber, but that was kind of like the reason why I asked is because I did contemplate being a realtor myself, but I didn't know much about it. And my profession is mostly building software and then being a podcaster on the occasion. But so that makes sense. You don't need to be a realtor to buy homes and to be successful at buying and selling homes. So,
Absolutely not. You're on the right path, right? You just need to find a good realtor, right?
okay.
But focus in on what you do best, you know?
So, okay. I know we've been talking a lot about financial advice and just some ways that people can look at how to fix their spending problems. But what I want to talk about now is a little bit more on crypto with the time that we have left. So, as far as crypto goes, have you had any clients? I believe you have this experience where you've worked with realtors and you might be a realtor. Correct me if I'm wrong. Have you had any new clients who've actually tried to leverage crypto recently or even before? How has that whole experience been for you?
Yeah, well, since Fannie Mae's accepted it, and I think
Okay,
the
yeah.
big institutions accepted it, more people are saving in crypto, right? And I think one great thing is that it gets people excited that wouldn't have been excited in investing, right? So you have a whole new people that now want to invest, which means they'll create better habits to save, right? And we've seen more people that are now able to buy homes because they invested in crypto. I love crypto for that reason. Responsibly, it's really great. I would never tell anyone to put all in on anything, but everyone should be saving and then investing, and some of that money should be in, crypto because it gets people excited. And I love it for that reason. And I think, look, the reality is that we're more at the beginning than near the end of crypto. So I think it's going to keep on evolving. There'll be more utility to it in the future. And it's going to be like a really mature asset. And when we're older and grandfathers, we'll go to our grandkids and be like, yeah, I was there in the beginning.
Yep.
But I would tell you the year 2026 is definitely way closer to the beginning than near the middle or the end. And that's what I think really exciting with everything that's happening in the economy is that it gives people, a lot of young, smart people, a new opportunity to make, have great jobs and wealth that weren't doing this before.
I agree. I think that's what excites me the most. I think crypto, the closest that I could explain it to someone who doesn't know anything about it at all, would be close to Forex or foreign currencies, just because the way they operate is very similar, although it's more technical. But what do you think the end game looks like for crypto? Maybe, let's say, what do you think it'll look like in 100 years from now?
That's a great question. I think there'll be more adoption for crypto, right? I think
For
there'll be
sure.
more ways to pay, right? It'll be I think it's gonna be more accepted to buy a home with it, even more than it is now. I think you could see some people getting more options to get paid in crypto. I just think it's still maturing, right? And it's heading in the right direction, which is adoption, right?
Yes.
It's never as fast as people want, but it's heading in the right direction. When Fidelity is accepting it, then that's a good thing. And I think it's going to
It's more
continue
legitimate.
over time. People want it and I think that's what some naysayers will have, because if it's not as fast as people want, then they say, well, it's not, but everything has its own adoption schedule. It's like watching your newborn, start to, sit, crawl, and then walk. Every newborn has its own schedule, and the same thing for crypto. It has its own schedule of adoption, and I think 100 years from now, it'll be just as accepted as the U.S. dollar. Well, maybe not as much as the U.S., but right there, because I think the U.S. dollar is this like the gold standard, right? But
Yeah,
just
I
right
was
there equal.
I was in New York for an event, and there's a lot of diversified people there. We were talking about what we think is the most valuable asset in the world today. I initially thought and said gold because the market cap is like 30 trillion at least. And this person told me it's the US dollar. And I was kind of baffled because I'm like, dude, the dollar is not, it has no support. And then my buddy at the time there, he was there and he said, no, actually, it's backed by the military. But then, he made that point, and then the guy who asked me that question said, no, so all these other countries, they're still getting dollars, they have treasuries, they're buying bonds. The dollar, if it were to lose its dominance, we would probably be in a recession faster than the AI bubble can pop. So the dollar is very important, but I definitely think there's room for other assets like Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is going to be, in 100 years from now, worth a lot more if it continues to the appreciating value. There's this whole thing with ETF flows, the macro, the halving cycles, you name it. Like Bitcoin is more complicated than people realize. But in 100 years from now, I think it'll be worth a lot more. And I also think because of its scarcity, it could become more reliable than even gold, because gold, you can mine it in some other planet if we get to that point. But, Bitcoin, there's only 21 million of them. So I think it's going to become a reliable form of validating scarcity. Does that?
I totally agree. I think Bitcoin, has a really good place as a store of value. That's its utility as a store of value, right?
Yes.
So I think that is like really exciting. Like that is the gold standard. So if you're like, well, what do you think? I think like, people like, Bitcoin is great. Ethereum is really good, right? Like some basic coins. Now, some of the coins people want to hit the lottery on, right? Like these meme coins. I'm not,
Yep.
and I think this is where things have to kind of get like worked out. Is that like, to not, mix up, the gold standard, right, of coins versus, and I'll just say like in my mind, there's like two right now, Ethereum and Bitcoin. You could make an argument, what's 3 and 4 and all these fancy things, right? But in my mind, if you just ask two people, those are probably the two most well-known coins, right? The other
Bitcoin and
ones
Ethereum.
have value. I'm not sure, right? It's like, you're like, well, give me a comp for like a regular person. You're not investing in the US dollar anymore, right? You're investing in like some country I've never heard of, right? And I think that's,
Yeah.
I think that kind of like people like get hurt on speculation. People get hurt on on these type of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to see people get hurt on speculation,
It happens
right?
all the
And
time.
so I think like people have to become better educated of like what's the what you should think of, or what you should invest in, right? It's the same thing for stocks. Invest in companies right? I heard Apple is a good company. Nvidia, like these are big companies, right? And I think, you have certain cryptos that are the same, but, imagine you were a celebrity and you were pumping up, say, like a company that was like absolute crap, the company, right?
Kind
It
of
was
like, okay.
yeah,
Like
just
ads
say
or
it was
something?
like something horrible that didn't work. You would like lose credibility, right? And I think sometimes like when you see some of these cryptos, right, because they get mixed in the same sentence, like crypto gets mixed in the same sentence as Bitcoin, and it shouldn't, right? So I would say there has to eventually be more of like a separation or certification of certain of the cryptos, like I think the Bitcoin or the Ethereum, versus like a coin named after a celebrity, right? I think.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's a lot of strict rules. Like you can't just pump up companies, right? It's illegal, right? Because it's more regulated. You can't just pump things up. In fact, Elon Musk got in trouble for this,
Yeah,
right?
with SpaceX was it, or was it?
I don't know. There was
Tesla?
some other company at once. He got in trouble with the SEC, but I think
Oh, yeah.
that
I know what you're talking about.
I think people have to be careful of sponsoring certain coins because anyone can create a coin. Creating a coin is much easier than creating a company,
Yep.
right? And then pumping it up and like that, a lot of people have a couple bad apples have ruined it, right? And so.
Yep.
You're like, well, what do you think? Well, I do think it needs, certain types of like regulation in terms of like, and I know people say, well, that's not the beauty of decentralized. Look, there's a difference between a decentralized technology and, someone pumping something up for for someone that doesn't know anything, selling it as a real investment, and then selling all your cryptos 5 minutes later as you're buying, I'm selling. This is completely different, arguments, right? And so,
For sure. Yeah.
I do think there has to be certain regulations to give more confidence because I think, crypto's a great thing, and I think it's still evolving. It can create. America is the leader of crypto right now, and I want it to keep on being the leader, right? We don't want other countries to take it over. We have a lot of, I think one thing that's made, America so great is the American dream. We can have a lot of entrepreneurs. But like I said, there's a bigger difference between an entrepreneur and it creates a great utility of a coin versus a pump and dump scheme. This hurts crypto. It hurts,
Yep.
it
very
hurts,
bad.
people investing. And I'm for crypto, and I'm for entrepreneurs. But you're like, well, what happened? It has to be done. Well, I think maybe some self-regulation or the government has to get involved in certain other ways, right? And I think, look, it's come a long way. Bitcoin started
Really has.
off in like the Silk Road, right? It started off in a poker hall.
That's how it got big.
Right? And the reality is I could have invested in Bitcoin, and I didn't because it was involved in poker, and I didn't want to play poker when I was like way younger, right? I hated gambling. And so I just think that like the maturity will happen and they'll come up with ways to kind of protect people, and that protection is good. I would also say that to the crypto community. Protecting vulnerable people that don't know is a good thing, right?
Good for others.
But allow it to keep on evolving. If people want to create their own currency or their own coins, God bless you. But as long as it's under the intent of a better utility, a better way to do it, its utility cannot be, I'm selling while you're buying.
Yeah, like you don't want, if people are going to make a token or an asset, it cannot be simply on speculation. There has to be actual utility. So I think, Solana is a great ecosystem, but right now they're plagued by Pump.fun, which is literally a platform that makes a whole hundreds of millions in commissions off of pump and dumps and whenever people are buying it in. It's kind of like the crypto lottery is how they're treating it. But you've been mentioning utility, and I know real estate is some utility. So can you maybe define a little bit more on how utility that is practical looks like versus something that may not be as useful, even though it's still got the utility label on it?
Yes. So a utility would be, for Bitcoin's utility, it's a store of value because there's a limited number. That's the function of it, right?
Okay.
A utility for like real estate would be you get rent. A utility for stocks is, if it pays it, a dividend. So you got to ask yourself, what item of value does this now give me for investing in this, right? Like what item of value? And a lot of the coin, not a lot, but certain coins don't have items of value. If it like allows you to do a transaction less expensive, then that's the utility, right? But if it's just a meme coin and there's no utility to it, or there's no there's no like you can't redeem it, or there's no like value, then it makes no sense, because it'll never produce any value. It's, and that's the biggest thing. Can it produce value in some sort? And a lot of the coins don't. And that's where I think it has to kind of, like get cracked down on, is things that never have any chance of providing value need to be eliminated, right? Like, you just can't create fake companies and then try to sell them, and I think once that happens, more of an infrastructure, then I think it's going to really take off much further, right? Like, I'll tell you one thing. If there wasn't these crap coins, right, Bitcoin would not be 70,000. It would be like 7 million right now. I think it would be 7 million or 1 million. It'd be way higher. People can't figure it out. You have a lot of fancy people. They start creating inflows and outflows and fancy charts, and they went to fancy schools, and they don't know why. Bitcoin is not $1 million right now. I know why it's not $1 million. 100%.
I think I follow you. I think what you're saying, and just from my understanding, I'm asking for clarification, like maybe because crypto right now has had such negative PR, or people only associate it as a scam, people are just not putting their money on crypto as much, or they're taking it away because, first of all, I have a few reasons why I think Bitcoin is the way it is right now, but is that more or less your take? Like, Bitcoin could be worth a lot more, but because...
Yeah, it would be worth tremendously more, not a little bit more. I mean, I think it'd be worth and look, I'm just a casual observer. I would call myself an observer of what's happening.
Okay.
That's what I am.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm an observer. I feel the market. I feel everything. I see it. I talk to a lot of people, and I know how to correct it, right? And I think what made crypto so great, and it is great, is also hurting it at the same time. And I think once it gets, and people think regulation is always bad. It's not. And I think
I don't think it's bad.
Once that gets cleaned up a little bit, right? I mean, you had Jake Paul have this coin, and then like everyone lost their money, right? Jake Paul, right? And then you had this other girl, I forget what her name was, but she was famous for BJ's. She made a lot of money and she sold her coins, right? And then I didn't know any better, right? I forget what her name was. She made money from a street interview and then got famous overnight.
Oh, the Hawk-Tua girl from...
Yeah, the Hawk-Tua girl, right?
That one, yeah.
The BJ girl, the Hawk-Tua girl, right? And
Haley
you say,
Welsh
well,
is her
why
name.
did this happen, right? And she got involved in the scam. And, she lost the little fame that she had, the little credibility that she had. What did she do? She was on a roll at least. She was selling T-shirts. And she was, like, really likable. Her thing was...
She really was likable.
She was, like, a super likable person. She wasn't the most pretty or whatever. She was at the right place at the right time. And she just came off as likable. And she went from, like, likable to a villain.
Yep.
Like, pretty quick. And you're like, how do you do this? She got involved. And then, the federal government got involved. I think she had to give back everything. She did make a couple of million, but then lost it. And the same with Jake Paul. Like, they get involved. People get involved in these things, and famous people have. And Tom Brady did, I think, too, right? They got involved in,
He was actually involved with FTX. You were mentioning,
all these things for no reason, right? They get involved in these things for no reason, right? And then what happens is that it hurts the community. So I think the community is being hurt and has been hurt by not while the technology's advanced, but by a couple bad actors. Right? And I think
these people have
this is a big
large
thing.
Influence too. I agree. Like, I think it's a large these bad apples, unfortunately, they have a very big influence. And I don't think they may always have started with a bad intention. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but some other people that you didn't mention that I was immediately thinking of were the famous boxer Jake Paul. I mean, he's not
And
really
Floyd
famous yet.
Mayweather got in trouble
Floyd
for this
Mayweather.
also.
Yeah, he was pumping a lot of NFT collections and everything, and I knew something was very fishy about it, but I guess that's just my natural. You grow more wary when you've been scammed quite a bit. I've been scammed before, but not as much as I believe as other people have with NFTs. But with Floyd Mayweather, he released quite a few, and then Trump also released a few, and then the meme coin, that's up to the speculator to look at those things. But for me, by not fully diving into these trends, I've been able to not lose a lot of money, as other people have lost
You,
money.
you,
So
Yeah, and
you
I'll tell
just
you
got to
something.
be
My
careful.
mom's an artist, right? And my mom's old, right?
My
I'm
respects.
48. She's like 76, right? And she's an
My
artist.
respects.
And last year, whenever the height, or 2 years ago, the height of the NFT market, my 78-year-old mom made an NFT of me.
Oh, wow.
And
That's
you're like,
cute.
well, what did it sell for? What did a Phil Ganz NFT sell for? At the height of the market, it sold for $200.
Oh, wow, $200.
No, who would want to buy a Phil Ganz? Why would he buy a Phil Ganz NFT? And I was partly upset for multiple reasons. One, I don't want an NFT of Phil Ganz. Let's start with this. And two, I was upset to my mom, and she's an artist. It's very hard for artists to make money. So this was like a new thing
Yes.
for artists to make money. And I said to myself, if a Phil Ganz NFT someone bought for $200, I'm like, what is it's I mean, I'm like, this has gone too far, right? And so I think that's when I knew NFTs were not like the world's greatest investment.
It's all just pure speculation. I think some of them try to get creative with some utility, like concert tickets or exclusive perks and benefits, but the delivery of all those perks and benefits just always fell short. So I think people caught on, like, no, people are just trying to take our money. And I think you look at NFTs now, everybody hates them. I cannot think of one person who absolutely likes them or loves them.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, that is the utility. They would try to tie the picture with a benefit. You're right, a concert ticket, right? So it would be this. And before that, eBay used to be illegal. It used to be illegal to resell tickets. I think this has all changed, but in the beginning it was illegal, right? And so what people would do is that to confuse the value, they would say, we got New England Patriots tickets and a picture of Tom Brady and a mug and a water bottle. Now the picture of Tom Brady in the water bottle is probably worth $3. And the tickets had a face value of $150, but they would sell the tickets for $800. But by creating, fake value for this picture in the mug, you were able to get around and sell your tickets also, because you couldn't figure out what all these other items were worth, right? And
That's funny.
This went
That's a good
on
point.
for a little bit, right? And this is kind of was like the NFT playbook of creating, certain values to that. And that's, and I'm all for people being creative, but I'm mostly for transparency. Just think we need to be transparent and honest. Be creative. But you can't fool people, right? That's not fair, right? And that's what they would say. In fact, you're seeing this right now, the World Cup. People are getting tricked on tickets and this and that. And, I feel like every third day there's something in the newspaper of some family that try to use their last remaining life savings to see a game and can't get access to the game. So
Yeah, especially with the World Cup right now being kind of around. I was trying to actually buy tickets. They're actually super expensive. And then the Knicks versus Spurs for basketball, tickets were a couple thousand each for the finals. So I see what you're saying.
yeah, and the people that can least afford it get totally scammed. right? And this is
Yeah, a lot of those scams
they're
also
set
happen.
up all over the place, right? I mean, the story of me going to Florida is I thought I was getting a good deal, so I bought the hotel through a third-party website, right? And then the third-party website, after they collected millions of dollars for the Super Bowl, went bankrupt, took my money, and then I didn't have a place to stay in Miami for the Patriots-Falcons Super Bowl. I did stay in Key Largo, Florida. But that's another story. I'm saying is when people want something, people put up websites and way to buy things, and they take advantage of people that don't really like know, because it's already such an expensive event that people look to save money, right? This is true. They can barely even already afford it, so you're susceptible to, quote, a good deal because you're just trying to be able to go and get in.
No, it's a great point, but I will say we are almost out of time. So before we end today, Phil, you know, really love talking to you. It was a great pleasure. Do you have any, final thoughts maybe for the audience? Any final piece of advice, or if you want to give a shout out, or you want to leave a message?
Yeah, my final advice for people would be to go over your monthly finances and save your money. And if people have any questions, you can always send me a text or call me 617-529-9317. Or you could go on LinkedIn or Instagram at Ask the Mortgage Expert and find me. I'm Phil Ganz. I'd love to help, chat finances, help you in any way I can.
Great, I love that, Phil. Thanks so much, and thank you all for watching.